welcome to Daily Debrief from People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya and today we talk about the IAEA's plan to censure Iran over its nuclear project, Algeria suspending cooperation with Spain, and the latest on the COVID vaccine access discussions at the coming WTO ministerial. Iran has dismantled some cameras monitoring a nuclear site after Western nations said it was not cooperating with the IAEA. The IAEA installed the cameras to monitor Iran's nuclear projects. The site where the cameras were turned off is unknown, but according to the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, the cameras exceeded what it had to do as part of its safeguards agreement with IAEA. We'll talk to Abdul about this development. Hi Abdul, is Iran responding to the talk about censure, and who is involved in this censure?
Well, the switching of two cameras, as it is pointed out, Iran is claiming that these are additional cameras. So other cameras which were installed as part of the agreement between Iran and IAEA last year, those cameras are intact and the agreement stands. So the responding does not mean that Iran has stopped cooperating with the IAEA. Iran has complaints about its activities, it has doubts about its impartiality and all those things which it has articulated in the public in the last few days, particularly after Grossi's visit, IAEA's chief's visit to Israel. But it has not done anything which can be assumed as unwarranted or which basically hampers its cooperation with IAEA yet. As far as the question of who is involved in this censoring is concerned, we all know that this is primarily the United States and its regional ally Israel, who are basically instrumental in mobilizing the European countries, 3 European countries, and other members of the board of directors, which met in Vienna. And yesterday, I think the resolution censoring Iran's role has been passed. So we know that United States has unilaterally withdrawn from the nuclear deal, which basically legitimizes the IAEA's inspection of Iranian nuclear sites to some extent. And Israel, which has no IAEA monitoring, despite the fact that it is not a signatory of NPT and it is one of those countries which is assumed to have nuclear weapons, a large number of nuclear weapons, they are the basic players in behind this particular resolution.
Okay. Abdul, does this have anything to do with the JCPOA, with the Iran nuclear deal as well?
Of course, this entire incident, if you see, IAEA inspection happens as per the mandate of the NPT, and Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was signed in 1968. Iran is a signatory, Israel is not a signatory. So all the signatories have to allow the inspection by the IAEA inspectors. That is what Iran is one of those countries, in fact the country which has the highest number of inspection and which has been thoroughly inspected by IAEA inspectors throughout these years, despite the allegations. In fact, earlier IAEA had praised Iranian cooperation.
Right.
So this the complaints about Iran not cooperating with IAEA is a recent thing, particularly after the JCPO, US withdrawal from the JCPO, the nuclear deal. Apart from the NPT, nuclear deal also mandated thorough inspection of Iranian nuclear sites as the part of the deal. We know that. But Iran claims since US has withdrawn from the deal, that part of the IAEA inspections becomes inoperational. Despite that, the inspections were going on. Though Iran has started enriching uranium at the higher level, storing uranium against the provisions of JCPO, claiming that since US had withdrawn, then the deal has become ineffective. But it allowed the inspectors to carry out physical inspection of all its nuclear sites. But in 2021, Iranian parliament, as a kind of, you can say, as a response to US not trying to come back to the deal, the JCPO, Iranian parliament passed a resolution asking all the inspectors, IAEA inspectors, to leave the country. They left, but Iran still continued cooperating with the IAEA in a way that it agreed to install cameras on its nuclear sites, and all the recordings were to be handed over to handed over to IAEA once the deal is resumed. It means the negotiations between US and Iran, indirect negotiations which are going on in Vienna, they come to some conclusion once the deal is revived. The proceedings recorded in the cameras will be handed over to IAEA. This was the deal. This is the safeguard deal which we are talking about. So that cooperation continues, but as we see that despite continued Iranian cooperation, there is an attempt to vilify its role, particularly by the IAEA, and as Iran claims, this is happening under the pressure by the US and Israel.
All right, Abdul, thanks a lot for that update. Algeria has decided to suspend cooperation with Spain. The countries have a 2-decade-old treaty. The issue is over Western Sahara, which has been colonized by Algeria's neighbor, Morocco. Spain recently changed its position on Western Sahara. The Algeria-backed Polisario movement seeks a referendum on the region. It was under Spanish control until 1975. We'll return to Abdul for more on this dispute. Abdul, Algeria has taken issue with Spain. What is really going on here?
As per the official statement issued by Algerian government, it says that it sees Spain's change of stance on Morocco's position or the status of Western Sahara as something which is which goes against the ethos of their relationship between Algeria and Spain, and hence they are basically suspending the agreement which was signed in 2002. They have also suspended the trade.
Right.
It means this has reached to a new level. Why Algeria is doing that is an interesting point to explore. Basically, the Polisario movement, the movement for the self-determination of Western Sahara, you can say, has been backed by Algeria for quite a long time. In fact, since the beginning. And Spain, which was the occupying force, which was the colonial master of the Western Sahara before it withdrew in 1975, has agreed that till now had agreed that the only solution for the Western Sahara's question is the referendum under the UN monitoring.
Okay.
So a referendum will decide whether the Western Sahara should be an independent state or it should be the part of Morocco. But recently, due to some diplomatic problems between Morocco and Spain, particularly after Spain allowed the leader of the Polisario Front to visit the country for COVID treatment, Morocco took exception to it and did that basically exploded into a diplomatic row between Morocco and given the fact that Morocco and Spain are very close, they have very close trade ties and political ties, historical ties. The new government in Spain has basically decided to go back to its position of allowing the resolution of the conflict through the UN mandated referendum. Now they are saying that they agree with Morocco's idea of limited autonomy to Western Sahara instead of a referendum.
Okay.
That means a complete change of the position. Hence, Algeria has argued, since you were the ex-colony, colonial master, and you had so far the issue was created because of your occupation of Western Sahara, you cannot take such decisions and expect us to be good friends. So that is the background in which Algeria has taken that particular decision. It is also, Algeria, by the way, just to bring the context here, Algeria also had withdrawn its diplomatic relationship with Morocco. on this particular issue itself.
Okay. Now, the question of a referendum in Western Sahara was always there. That was always supposed to be the option. Why is it that Spain has suddenly changed its position on this?
As I said, there are many reasons behind it. The first, of course, is the change in the stance in the governance in Spain. Abraham Accord signed between US and Morocco in 2020, which recognized Morocco's claims over Western Sahara for the first time. Even US had believed till then that there should be referendum. So once the US has changed its position, you can say that most of the NATO members also follow the US line. Apart from that, there is a larger setback to the anti-colonial movements all across the world. That can also be one of the reasons. Apart from that, the economic problems faced by Morocco at this, Spain at this juncture, when we know that because of the sanctions on Russia, it is no more able to kind of import as much gas as it requires. Hence, the prices of other commodities, food and everything is going up. Spain does not want to make Morocco hostile at this particular juncture, given the fact that Morocco is one of the biggest trading partners of Spain. So, change of Spain's stance on Western Sahara is very much on expected lines. It has seen that what can happen if you do not follow Morocco's line on this issue. Last year, 10,000 plus migrants were pushed by Morocco, means not controlling their movement, pushed by Morocco inside Spain, which led to, according to the claims made by Spanish government, that has led to a lot of problems within the country. So, to avoid such problems in future, to avoid breaking of relationship between Morocco and Spain, I think Spain has taken a side and decided to be quote unquote pragmatic instead of being idealistic on this particular position, because given the fact that Western Sahara does not have a functioning government at this time, there is a Polisario Front which is a very small, which controls a small territory, and I think Algeria was not into that calculation. This may change or may affect the decision in future.
All right. Thanks a lot for that update, Abdul. The United Kingdom and Switzerland, backed by the EU, have proposed amendments to the COVID-19 TRIPS waiver. The amendments have serious implications for vaccine access, especially in low-income countries. Activists and people following the WTO ministerial, which begins on June 12, say the WTO Director General has supported the restrictive view of rich countries. Unequal vaccine access hurt people in the global south during the pandemic. Now, for example, UK wants amendments to exclude tools that manufacture COVID vaccines. Such amendments are making the task of making vaccines and therapies for COVID available around the world more difficult. We'll talk to Anna from the People's Health Movement about this. Anna, what is the exact status of the negotiations on the TRIPS waiver for the COVID vaccine?
So just to recap a bit, it's been almost 20 months from when the TRIPS waiver was first tabled at the WTO. That was done by India and South Africa in an attempt to make COVID-19 medical products, that includes vaccines and therapeutics and testing, more accessible to the global south. But now for the last months, and basically from the very beginning, we have seen several attempts by the global north to obstruct this process and to come up with something which is not even near the original TRIPS waiver, and to actually minimize the possibility of pharma profits being undermined by fair sharing and increased accessibility of COVID-19 products. And so now we are looking at a set of negotiations which are taking place just ahead of the 12th ministerial conference of the WTO, which is going to start this weekend. And the TRIPS waiver is again on the table. People are there to discuss what has been suggested in the previous months. But to be frank, it's not looking too great. So actually, it's looking quite discouraging, because over the last couple of days, we have seen reports coming out of Geneva that the discussion is being monopolized by rich countries, that the Global South is being completely excluded from the negotiating room. And that is, of course, having a major impact on how the actual waiver might look. And one of the significant things that we have heard coming from the activists in Geneva is that the EU delegation actually left the negotiating room at some point of the discussion, because the African group was pushing for a fairer and more inclusive waiver. And another worrying thing is that these claims have been repeated and expanded by saying that the World Trade Organization Director General has actually taken the EU side against the African groups and basically said that they should accept what the Global North is pushing for.
All right. What is the Global North pushing for? What is the difference in their expectations and amendments compared to the other countries?
Basically, what the Global North is doing is not even a waiver. So many trade justice and health justice activists have pointed out that it would actually be better for us not to have a waiver than have something that goes along the lines of what the EU and the UK and Switzerland are pushing for. So basically, what they are trying to do is, first, they have restricted the waiver only to vaccines. So let's look back and say, the Global South actually wanted a waiver which covers everything, because if we had a waiver which applies to the medicines and to the testing, we would be able to address all parts of the pandemic response, not only vaccination. Right. So rich countries are now saying, no, just vaccines. But even under this very limited scope of the waiver, only on vaccines, some of them are saying that this is not enough. So they're trying even to restrict what can be done in this field. And so, they're saying if someone wants to apply the waiver, if a generic manufacturer wants to make vaccines under the waiver, they have to list all the patents which apply to this vaccine in order to be able to use the waiver. And that's nearly impossible. So there's a lot of patents which apply to vaccine ingredients, to a vaccine. And so, asking someone to list them all is quite impossible. So if you're doing that, that means that you know what you're doing, and you want to make things complicated for the countries which are trying to implement this. Then, in addition to that, they're talking about time limits. So, it's not a waiver forever, but it's a waiver for a set amount of time. What happens if the time runs out and the pandemic is still here? That could happen. A third limit, which has been brought up even earlier by the EU, is that some countries would not be allowed to use the waiver, and those being countries which have ensured 10% or more of global supply in 2021. So this is, of course, targeting China. So it's a very deliberate attempt to find different ways of limiting the waiver and making it harder for the Global South to implement it once it's passed. And so these three things have been brought up by the EU earlier on. But now what we are seeing is that other rich countries are coming in, like the UK and Switzerland, most notably, and they're really pushing for some brackets and some additions that would make the TRIPS waiver version, this TRIPS waiver version, even worse than it was. So, for example, the UK would like to exclude some of the tools which are necessary for vaccine production. So, they would say that, I don't know, filters or other kinds of tools which are necessary for producing the vaccines would not be covered by the waiver, which, of course, it makes it even more difficult to implement. So at the moment, this version is, of course, only supported by the Global North. Unfortunately, it seems it has the support of the WTO Director General. And of course, it has what we can assume is the full support of the pharma industry because it really fits with their plans. So let's just remember that a couple of weeks ago, Moderna CEO said at the public forum that sharing technology through WHO technology sharing hubs is not really a priority for them. So they're still pushing for the profit over fair global access to vaccines.
And that's all we have for today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. Please come back to us tomorrow. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And for more updates and analysis from around the world, visit peoplesdispatch.org.